Hi everyone, and welcome to a Masters at Work Christmas special. And remember, if you missed part 1 and 2, do not go any further. Turn around and watch them now by clicking right here. In part 3, James adds some final effects with the classic SCI Pro 1, as well as finishing touches on the Master Bus. Hope you enjoy it, and if you want to learn more about mixing, make sure you check out our courses at pointblanklondon.com. One clip.
Okay, so now the fun starts. We can really start to think about this as an actual, almost drum composition. And sometimes I find it's great to do this before you actually even start getting any synths or any sounds out, to actually start to build your drum track. Because already it will throw up ideas for the things that you want to actually put inside it. I've got some more sounds here just on the SP1200, got a kind of bank of percussion. And the beauty of it is, with SP1200 is when you start to bring the tuning down and it hits against, the tuning does something weird with inside it, and you start to get those aliasing frequencies out, you can really start to come up with some good stuff. So let's see what we can do with a selection of these kind of tom sounds. I'm just going to fire them in completely manually, and then we'll go and trim them up wherever they need to be. Perfect, and I'm just going to go onto a different section and maybe have a look at, that's quite a nice sound. And what we're just after grabbing here are some more bits of percussion and flavours that we can add into this later on. Now how about one of these shakers? A little too grainy maybe. Let's have a look. May use that just to pick up some of the open hi-hats. And I'm hitting them in live, mainly because it's just so much more fun, to be honest. And the great thing is, if you're playing stuff in live, you're creating a swing that is purely yours. No one else can grab it. So, just on these toms, or these kind of tom-esque sounds, I'm going to use some, again, 80s kind of gated reverb just to add some ambience. So here we are, made for drums. Let's have a look. Any old thing, drum gated. Nah. First of all, let's just see what they look like in the track. That's not bad. Let's put them exactly on the beat and see what happens. Yeah, perfect. So duplicate all of those in. And we've got a little bit of reverb in there. I may go just a touch more. Let's use our old friend, the basic one. And I've got that completely wet at the moment. So once again, I'm going to group it and name these up, reverb and dry. For some reason I prefer doing reverbs like this. It just seems that it can be more additive. You can have less or more of it. And it's not like a wet dry control where the actual dry signal gets any less. It's either adding or taking away. I suppose we should really make that reverb sound like an SP1200. We can just use Redux. And what I find is when you're starting to work with an entire drum arrangement, there's a series of loops that happen in your head, and you hear the kind of repetitive nature of the initial loop, the initial kind of house loop. But then it's always good to have something happen maybe every 4 bars, and then something else every 8 bars, and then you get the natural fills when you go into, say, every 16 bars. And the classic thing for me to always do to muck around with this, particularly on the long bar switches, are to do stuff with a kick drum. So This is now a 16 bar section, and I'm just going to drop the kick out a little bit at the end of this one, at the end of, let's say, the last bar of this 16 bar turnaround. And just going to take the kick, it's on a separate channel, I'm going to put it to the same level, and then we're just going to roll all the bottom end off. And straight back in. And just taking the bass away from just that moment, or the sub out of the kick, can have a massive impact on the building of a drum track. Let's copy our little explosion in. And it would be nice to have something happening just before that clap. So I'm going to open another channel, copy our clap down. This is our clap from the TR8 that's got the quadriverb reverb on, so it's nice and chunky. Now let's nice, but it's still quite grainy. So let's have a little play with something posh just for this one sound. Let's use the Eventide Ultra Reverb. Now this is from the algorithms from their really scary boxes, and it's absolutely beautiful sounding stuff. This is that clap put through that fully wet with quite a long decay time. Let's go for the Hall preset. Wonderful stuff. So I'm going to freeze that down. Flatten it. That's a lot. Just trim the end off. Don't need all of that stuff there. Click on the actual region and then come down here, and I'm just going to reverse it. So effectively what we're doing here is starting to build effects, but just using the sounds that we've already used and some additional processing. Not bad. It kind of got into the right place. Let's see if we can pull it just back. For some reason at the moment I love it when a reverse reverb ends just before the actual sound it's supposed to go into. Let's give our cymbals a little bit of action. Good old-fashioned ping-pong delay. Now, one note when using really wide effects like reverbs and delays, you don't often want everything to be right at the end of the stereo spectrum. What happens is you tend to get all of this movement right on the outside, and it can be a little bit disconcerting, especially on headphones. So sometimes it's worth getting into the habit of, when you're setting up big things like just a simple little ping pong delay like that, to actually bring the effect in stereo width. So it's got, everything's kind of almost a little bit more controlled. So not everything is just completely wide. And to do that, I'm just gonna create a little parallel train. So our ping pong delay is now in parallel. Solo the effect. And then on the channel that's got the delay on it, which we'll mark up here, we'll stick a utility in and bring the width in. Now let's start to just quickly arrange this so it's all sitting in quite nicely. I'm just cutting a few sections out there so we're always getting almost like a constantly building drum pattern. And there's our little shaker. Just popped in. Yet again, I've got another really small little Ableton reverb on this. Let's get rid of all of the crap at the bottom, we don't need that. And we certainly want our reverse clap to go right up to maybe pull it back. And then I want a big reverb just to cover almost that, that gaping hole that we've got as it dives into the 808 stuff. Let's just check I've got what's on here. Okay, I need a little bit more gain here, so I'm going to copy this reverb track. Just delete that one from here. I have edited our hat part there because, to be honest, that one that kind of stopped and started was pretty pants. So, but now let me quickly show you how to kind of bed some of these sounds in. If I group all of these, because they're from an analog source and it's incredibly, as I like to call it, pokey, it really does, each sound kind of sticks out. It's pure analog synthesis, so it doesn't have any of the almost grain and almost tape-like qualities that some of the stuff from the samplers has. It can often, each sound can be incredibly transient and not always fit. So once again, let me show you how we can sort that out with parallel processing. So I've grouped all of our 808 sounds together here, and I'm going to stick them into a compressor and really hammer it. Now that's not the kind of processing you'd want on the track on your 808 loop as a whole, but listen to what happens when we start to add some of that into a dry version of this. So just going to drop the level of the dry one a bit, and now start to feed some of our uber compressed version in. And then tweak this compressed version whilst we're here. So it's actually quite subtle when you're using a compression like that in parallel. So this is the loop before. And now with the compression applied, just seems to be more there, it just seems to be more together. Just want to look at a couple of other bits in some of the sonics here. One thing I noticed is we probably could do with a bit more top end. If you listen to the 808, it's really bright. It's really sizzly, whereas our hats can do with just a little bit more action in the house section. So once again, I'm going to use the kind of principle of parallel EQ, but I may just go a touch posher this time. I'm going to use the reviver on it first. Just kind of adds a bit of tape weight. And let me show you how you can use even just the built-in EQs in parallel here. So look, if we really wanted to brighten these hats up, we could probably grab and I always find at the top of anything, you want to be making fairly wide EQ moves. You don't really want too many things like this because it can get really phasey and great for effects, but not often good for actual top end EQ work. So keep it all quite wide, but we're going to go far too far. That's just bananas. And then we're going to group it up, bring the level of that channel all the way down. Once again, create our dry chain, and then we'll call this top end. And now as I bring this in, I'm effectively bringing a very harshly EQ'd version of the hi-hat in, but it will allow us to really control this top end EQ. Brilliant, exactly what we needed. So this is where we were before. And now with the parallel EQ applied, And you can see here visually just on that EQ curve, you wouldn't want that particularly on your audio, but in parallel to a completely dry track, it sounds great. Okay, let's just look at these two more sounds that we had in from the SP1200, see if we can utilise them in any way just to build the rhythm track. That's nice just to add a bit of lift occasionally in the top end. So I'm going to give it its own track, take the bottom off, and then duplicate that into a loop. That's quite a nice sound, but everything's got an awful lot of mono content at the moment. So I'm going to take Ableton's simple delay, turn the synchronizing off again so that it's not going to a particular division, turn it 100% wet, and I'm going to pull one of the channels about 19 or 20 milliseconds later, and that will cause the Hass effect, which basically pulls the thing incredibly wide. You do have to check everything in mono, but as you can hear, thoroughly successful on top end sounds like this. Now I'm just going to use a simple utility to bring the width of the whole channel in and bed it in with a little bit of, tiny bit of reverb. Just check the difference. So we'll hear the bar just before it comes in, and then as it comes in, we'll check that the level's right. Let's add a tiny little bit of delay spin on it. As I say, I'm trying to use just the inbuilt plugins here. There's a fine control here that just allows you to tweak the percentage. It's almost getting a shuffle onto that delay. Let's call that tambourine. There's one more sound we recorded in here, and then I'll look at the final range checks on this. Yeah, it kind of works. Let's see if that skippy bit works there. No, that's good, man. Also, we'll grab that and maybe lose that first one. I'm going to need the second bit. Copy. Now, I think it's time to actually build some proper synth effects into this. So I'm going to get one of the analog synths we've got here out. But just before, let's just have a look at the exit from the 808 section. Now, this is the section that we made when we passed a version of the entire drum loop through the little Roland sampler box. But it's got a cymbal crash at the beginning. So that gives me an idea that we could use that to repeat the cymbal crash here in the style that you'll all know once you hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And sometimes having a kind of thing that's been bounced down in stereo or a little stem of part of your work can be great fun, just for those simple, almost bullet edits. I'm going to take the hi-hats out for this last bar here. In fact, we'll take the kick as well out. I'll just maybe have the first one. So I'm going to end just on this rim. Don't need the clap in there either. And now I'm just going to use very, very simple little trick just to make this kind of pop out. I'm going to grab, again, the built-in reverb, nice and long. Turn it all the way wet and group this up. So we've got our reverb channel and our dry. So I'm just going to click on the reverb level, and you'll see on the screen our automation line is being shown there for that actual channel level. And this channel is just the wet reverb. And I'm going to slowly turn it up right before it kicks back in. And I've always loved this about live. If you grab the pen tool or hit B on the keyboard, you can take any automation and just whack it straight back down to 0. So we can rise this reverb level up over that last bar, and then as soon as the downbeat comes, just completely kill it. And thanks Ableton for sorting out all the plugin compensation, because everything now seems to be in time on those kind of automation moves. So I pulled out here the Sequential Pro one. So it's pure analog, it's mono synth, and it's great for this kind of stuff because it's got a kind of polymodulation section that allows us to throw things like the oscillator B onto the actual filter cutoff and all sorts of great stuff. So when you're just wanting to build atonal noise-based effects, this is the kind of perfect beast. But this is the bit I absolutely love, a tiny bit of resonance on there, but that's a little bit boring, so let's add a little bit of a very fast running oscillator. So I'm going to try and play straight in, completely live, and see if we can build a little noise riser here. And this for me is the appeal of analog, being able to actually grab stuff and actually just whack it in. So if I wanted a slightly less resonant version of that, let's do a longer, now 8-bar rise on the section that's coming into our kind of crushed beat. And for some reason with silly analog noises like that, it often doesn't matter where your oscillators go from a timing perspective, they just sound great anyway. In fact, I'll copy that other riser here, and we're going to add one effect just piling into this section. And I'm going to use the envelopes here in tandem. So long release now, and we use the filter envelope. Hit it right on that clap sound we got at the end. And we're going to record, don't really need to go all the way down to the bottom for the moment. I'm just going to record one more of those so we can use them as a stereo pair. Trim the ends, pan them left and right. And just to sell our riser effect, we'll just use a bit of ping pong delay. And while we're here, I'm quite tempted just to add a few little analog zaps. And we're going to add them to the bass drums that we've got just in this 808 section. I'm sending all of these through our little quad reverb unit as well, which is why we've got a little bit of ambience on this. First bar's better, so we'll copy that. Let's say Pro 1 Zap. Duplicate that in. One last thing, I just want to use a tonal rise. Now we're in high resonance mode, which on these kind of synths will bring out, even though you're using white noise as a source, you'll get a constant tone. We'll turn the attack all the way up and see if we can create some kind of tonal riser. All the fun to be had. Oh, well, that's got to be done. I'm just going to control it a little bit with some basic EQ. And spread it out and delays. And let's just see how long it goes for. And I'm gonna, halfway through, I'm just gonna tweak this frequency control, which is a cross modulation coming from the second oscillator that's kind of cross feeding into the resonant filter here. And as I bend it, you'll kind of hear this cross mod where one's falling, the other's rising. Proper clangers stuff. Okay, here we go. So we can safely say that the best part of that was just before the end there. So here's our newly presented Crazy Riser. Let's see what happens if I have these. And we could do with coming back in on the clap. So I'm just going to copy our last clap, feed in a bit of reverb. And what I'm quickly going to do is gather all of our sequential noises together. And I'm just going to bung some gentle sidechain on from the Cable Guys. Brilliant, brilliant volume shaper 4. Probably at about 25%, 40%. Great, already working. So look, I'm just going to apply a tiny bit of overall mastering, EQ and compression to this and see how it can really come alive. Now, I've always thought of when you're working in audio, it's a bit like when you're working in video. And if any guys of you played with video cameras or from video phones, you'll know that certain footage takes loads of additional processing and some of it breaks up early. And I tend to find it's the same with audio. It doesn't have to say that I'm suggesting that everyone should really be working in hardware at all, but what I'm saying is make sure that your source sounds are the very best that you can get them, because when you actually come to piece them together, you'll find, as I'll show you now, once I apply mastering to this, it's very much easy to get the final bit done. To do a little bit of the mastering at the moment, I'm going to use EOS's Air EQ, because for me it's the laziest mastering EQ in the world and quite brilliant because of this air band. Even though you may be careful on your EQ controls or when you're actually doing your top end work on the channels, it's always nice to just do a final bit on the master. And this air band here just lifts the top end in a way that I've not heard many other things actually do. So I'm going to take it in and out here so you can actually hear the difference. And for me, it's the kind of move that you can spend hours doing on other bits of equipment. And this just seems to do it in seconds. A little bit of low end. And I'm gonna use IK Multimedia's bus compression. Just for me, it works perfectly every single time. On the 2-track bus. It's really, obviously it's a kind of SSL type copy, but it just has a little extra something that for me always seems to work. Particularly useful is the high pass filter into the sidechain circuit. So as we kick it, it leaves an awful lot more of the bass information intact. And we're just starting to clip. outputs here. There we go, we've pretty much completed a drum track. Just one thing I do want to say here on all mastering limiters. Everyone seems to think that you should leave your limiter ceiling at 0, which basically creates an audio file at the end of it where it's written right up to the end stops. If your audio is going to go anywhere near any kind of compression algorithm, and by that I don't just mean MP3 or MP4, but I also mean SoundCloud or YouTube, because even though they may take WAVs in, they're playing back from a compressed format or playing back using a compressed codec. You do not want your audio file to be clipping exactly at 0. All compression algorithms kind of blast your audio to bits and then try to piece it back together. When that piecing back together process can happen, you can actually get bands coming together, frequency bands coming together that can cause a clip over the digital 0. So if your master file is exactly at 0, when it's recombined, it can sound pretty nasty. So it's always good practice just to drop the actual ceiling from your mastering limiter to either somewhere between 0.4 to 0.9, depending on the material. Here I'm going to be quite cautious and take it down to about minus 0.8. And I know now that should this ever turn into an MP3, it's still going to sound quite decent. But it can be great practice just to kind of one day concentrate on something like this. Because I find sometimes that I'll come into work, you've got bass lines in your head, you've got ideas in your head, and you just want to kind of get cracking. But then doing 3 or 4 hours of drum programming can really slow that process down. We'll make all of this stuff available with Point Blank, so you can even grab, users of Ableton can grab this session exactly as it stands, but I'll also stem some of these parts out for users of other DAWs. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.
Next time. All right, so hopefully you got plenty of tips and techniques from James's Master at Work Christmas special. And if you want to learn a lot more, make sure you check out our courses at pointblanklondon.com. We'll be back in 2016 with a lot more FFLs, artist interviews, and industry insight. So we'll see you then. Cheers.